Does this sound familiar? You've discovered this fantastic program to get money to fund your startup, only to get in the front door and find out that it's not one program, it's actually more than a dozen programs that you need to navigate. We're talking about SBIR and STTR, and today we're breaking down the big four SBIR and STTR programs. Those are the ones in the Department of Defense, the National Science Foundation, or NSF, the National Institute of Health, or NIH, and NASA, which I'm not going to spell out for you. You can look that one up. My name's Lorelei Elliott, and I'm joined by Sophia Lazaro. Together, we used the SBIR program to fund our startup Dauntless, and now we're sharing everything we learned to help other founders do the same and bootstrap their businesses to profitability. So let's jump in and compare which one are we doing first.
For each one of these, we're going to go through who they are, where to find what opportunities they post, what they fund, what funding caps they have, and their schedule and eligibility. And I think we should start with the biggest of them all, the DoD.
Big Daddy, DoD, or Department of Defense, or Department of War, depending on when you're watching this. Who are they? The agencies under the Department of Defense or Department of War are the Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, and then there's a whole bunch of other agencies, which include ones like DARPA, Missile Defense Agency, there's a health one. I'll put up the whole list. So it's all of these agencies. They may or may not have SBIR topics out. And where you find if they have a SBIR topic out or not is with this website where we have spent many, many hours, dodsibirSttr.mil. Just fair word of warning, if you are outside of the United States, you will not be able to access this website. You do have to be accessing it from inside the US. And what they fund with the topics listed on this website is anything that falls under the Department of Defense's critical technology areas, which I will go over briefly. Plus, they also fund open topics. The critical technology areas do change year over year. The ones that they have out right now you can find on this website, and they include advanced computing and software. This includes supercomputing, cloud computing, data storage, data processing. We also have advanced materials, biotechnology to help performance in congested logistics environments, direct energy, which includes lasers, high-powered microwaves, and energy particle beams, which really does sound like something out of a Bond film, energy resilience, advanced energy storage, microgrids, nuclear power, energy distribution innovations, future generation of wireless technology. I'm just going to say this one is basically 5G innovations. 5G and beyond falls into that bucket. Human machine interfaces. So these are things like Neuralink, where you have a computer directly interfacing with your brain, and then other technologies like haptics. I would put extended reality interfaces would fall into this category. This is often paired with human machine teaming. Then we have hypersonics. Hypersonics is anything at or above Mach 5, which is 5 times the speed of sound or 3,700 miles per hour. Integrated network system of systems. This is anything that helps the Department of Defense communicate information, data between the different departments and different agencies. Integrated sensing and cyber, which is cybersecurity, electronic warfare, radar, and communications related technologies. Microelectronics, this is mostly to do with bringing microelectronic manufacturing back to the United States. Then they have a quantum science category, which is quantum computing, quantum networks, sensors, atomic clocks, those kind of things. Almost at the end here, we have space technology. This one is very broad. Lots of technologies can fit into this one, and this is anything that has to do with human space flight, putting satellites into space, space communications. And then finally, we have trusted artificial intelligence and autonomy, anything AI, anything related to AI cybersecurity, and then anything that runs autonomously without a human in the loop would fall into that category. Now, these do change up year over year. This is the latest one. You can find it at this website right here that we'll link below.
I also think you can find within those topic areas, I'd be curious your take on this, but like seasonal shifts as to which topics are rising to the top to get funded more than others. So just because one of those themes that we just talked about, I would say connects to your business, doesn't mean that there's a topic open that's relevant to it right now. There's a high probability that there are some funding opportunities, but we do see swings
Oh, yeah.
in which of these mission directorates are getting what appears to be more SBIR and SITR funding within the DoD than others.
Yes, that's a good thing to point out. That list is all of the things that could be funded under the SBIR program.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there will be a topic out under that. I would look at those critical technology areas as a way of determining, could I possibly submit a proposal under these agencies or under this SBIR program? But yeah, don't expect that they have to offer up something. Even if you don't fit into any of those perfectly, or there doesn't happen to be a topic out the time you're looking, all agencies have to offer this thing called an open topic, where they don't put in any requirements as to what the technology has to do. You can basically cold pitch the DoD agency and see if they're interested. I think all SBIR programs across the board are mandated to have an open topic. They look a little different from agency to agency. The Air Force's open topic is the most straightforward, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's also the most open.
Yes.
For example, Navy started offering open topics. I think last year was their first year, and they're still themed. Like they're still open topic AI. If you make some type of underwater sensor, that would still not be a good topic to submit under. So the most open of the open topics, where it's a truly all call, would be Air Force, Space Force.
Yes. But even then, if you had an underwater sensor, it might be a hard pitch to the Air Force. It's open, but use your brain. Moving on to funding caps, these are fairly consistent ballpark, so you might feel like we're repeating ourselves a bit. But for phase ones, which are those entry level contracts you get when you first get into the program, these go from $50,000 up to $250,000, and you usually have to deliver everything over 90 days to 6 months. They're pretty short. And then you move up to phase twos, or you might do a direct to phase two, although those are harder to win. And the funding caps for those range from $750,000 up to $3 million, and you usually have 24 months to deliver. Now, that 3 million is a little bit of an outlier. It's usually Space Force and missile related topics that hit that $3 million cap. Most phase twos are around 1.5 million to 2 million. That's pretty consistent across the DoD program.
For someone hearing this for the first time, like the phase one being 50K to 250K, that could sound like a really wide range. The cap can fluctuate based on the number of topics they want to fund in a given cycle. So I feel like for years, the kind of average we saw was 75K. And now lately, with more hard tech topics coming out, we are seeing some topics that are 75K and then other topics that have a higher cap of 150. We are sometimes also seeing higher caps for STTRs versus SBIRs. So I know that can sound like a really wide range. The best way to think about it is we don't see anything under 50K and we're not seeing anything over 250 for a phase one. But that's why you sometimes see those fluctuations, is they are trying to match the funding levels to the topic, or they're trying to match the funding levels to the program. Like STTR is an inherently more expensive program to run because you have both a small business and a university involved.
A lot of people look at those phase ones and they're kind of like, oh, that's not enough money, or that's too small. I want to go after direct to phase two. If you are brand new to the program, apply to a couple phase ones.
Yeah.
It's a good way to get started, and you can always diversify and have a mix of phase ones and direct to phase twos. All right, moving on to schedule. The Department of Defense releases a new cycle of topics every month, so they'll have 12 releases a year. Not every single agency contributes a topic every single month. They all have their own release schedules, which you can look up on the website that we tagged at the beginning. But if you're new here, basically what you need to know is every 30 days, the first Wednesday of every month, you can go onto DoD, SBIR, STTR.mil, and look at new topics that have come out, and you'll have a month to apply to them. Some agencies will only contribute once a year, others will contribute. Like I feel like the Navy has new topics out every single month. So it really just depends.
I think it's the different departments.
Yeah.
Like you'll see Nav War maybe only 2 cycles, and then you'll see Nav C a different 2 cycles. But it does feel like the Navy, and I guess this last cycle didn't really have Air Force, but I feel like the Navy and the Air Force are almost always in there.
Yes. Usually Air Force has new topics out all the time too. Those open topics that I mentioned earlier, they are definitely not out every single month. That's only, I think, once a quarter max. So if you have your eyes on an open topic, you will want to check with the agency and just mark your calendar for when those are coming out. Moving on to eligibility. Again, we're going to sound like broken records here because the eligibility is pretty much the same across all programs. And that is that you need to be a US small business. So you do have to have your business entity established in one of the 50 states. You have to be registered with the Small Business Administration. So they'll give you a number once you do that's unique to you. Your business has to have fewer than 500 employees, and the business must be owned by US citizens or US permanent residents. Now, some topics will have restrictions for companies that have taken on venture capital funding, especially if you have taken on an amount of funding where you own less than 50% of the business. You're not disqualified from every single topic, but you are disqualified from some. In addition to that eligibility, in order to submit a proposal, you also have to be registered on sam.gov. You have to have a cage code given to you by a Defense Logistics Agency. You have to be registered with the SBA, which we already mentioned. You have to have an account on SBIR.gov, and you have to be set up in wide area workflow. And if this sounds like a lot, we have a free guide that breaks all of this down. So I'll leave a link to that below. You can check out the guide, and you don't have to take notes on all of these different registrations.
And none of those registrations cost money or are so complicated that you could not do them for free. There are services that are like, we'll do it for you. You don't save your money.
Yeah. It's
Use our free guide. It's not that hard. You can definitely do it. It is a little confusing. There is a lot of websites. That's why we wrote it all down.
Yes. And I think where people get desperate and then they'd go and pay one of these agencies, one of these like third parties to do it for them, is they don't leave enough time. So none of this is that hard to figure out. It's all pretty basic information. It just takes time. If you know you want to submit for one of these, give yourself a month in advance to get registered everywhere and you'll be good.
Let's talk about NSF, also known as the National Science Foundation. So, who are they? The National Science Foundation is a federal agency that funds fundamental science and engineering. Their SBIR and STTR program, which was the first and is the one most commonly branded as America's Seed Fund, specifically backs startups who are commercializing novel innovations with big potential impact across broad topic areas. So that lends us into what they fund. They fund high risk, high reward, deep tech is the broadest way to articulate it. We will link the website where you find all of this, which is seedfund.nsf.gov. There is also another page, What We Fund. They very helpfully have a searchable PDF because not only do they have a lot of topics that they fund, they have a lot of subtopics under those topics. So you can go and search to see what your business is relevant. Just to give you a taste of it, they have a whole topic area about nanotechnology. They have an entire topic area on artificial intelligence. They also have an entire topic on agriculture technology. And they also have a topic area on space, which you've already heard once. So if you are a company or want to build a company in the space economy, you now have two potential programs you can go through for SBIR and STTR funds. We'll link that below. Like I said, they have the most number of topic areas and subtopic areas, but the searchable PDF that they post and update is really good about providing descriptions for the subtopic areas so you can get a good feel of whether or not it's going to be relevant to you. Is there anything else we want to call out in terms of what they fund and how it varies from DoD?
I think DoD makes more awards, but NSF covers more technology areas. So between the two, you should be able to find a home.
I would also encourage startups who are thinking about those two programs to consider is that the DoD's main goal is to convert you into a program of record, right? They want to transition the technology out of R&D into something that they can deploy and use. So they generally fund things that they then want to buy. That is not necessarily true of NSF.
Yeah.
NSF, they don't intend to be your customer. They intend to fund and de-risk and provide scientific and engineering support for high technical risk ideas so that they can go to market. Whereas even though the transition rate is very low, the ambition for most DoD phase one topics is that this is something that the government would like to buy. And therefore, we're going to fund the R&D of it so that we can eventually procure it. That's not necessarily true with the NSF. It doesn't mean that something that you went through NSF couldn't end up being purchased by a federal agency. It just means it's less of a goal to the types of topics that they fund, which I think is why you see such a wider area of different technologies and different areas that they will allocate money to.
Yes, that's very true. Your key to progressing along a SBIR with DoD is that you have clear markers that someone on the DoD side is going to buy it. That's what pulls you along. With NSF, that is not there.
Yeah, is that they will not fund clinical trials or any kind of regulated study that involves study on humans. Let's talk about funding caps. So their phase one is 275K. It's a fixed award, typically 12 months. Their phase two is a million and it's typically 24 months. They do have some potential supplement programs like a phase 2B, things like that. Those are only relevant once you're in the programs. Their schedule is different. They use windows that open and close several times a year annually, and basically every window is what the DoD would consider an open topic. So if you're in one of their categories, you can submit during their open window and get evaluated. What's different about the NSF process is that you get started with a more limited pitch. You don't build out a full proposal, and then you get feedback about whether or not you should advance with that proposal or whether or not you should refine your pitch. Last but not least is eligibility. Eligibility is the same. There are no differences from DoD to NSF on what would make you eligible. The only thing that they would consider not eligible would be work that involves clinical trials. But
Yeah,
NIH,
National Institute of Health. So, as Sophia alluded, with NSF, they don't fund anything with human trials or clinical trials, and that's because that is covered by the National Institute of Health's program. The National Institute of Health partners with Centers for Disease Control, so CDC, and the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, to fund scientists and entrepreneurs working to bring technologies, innovations, and discoveries that they're working on to patients. So to actually get them out in the world. And you can find them at seed.nih.gov. And they fund pretty much anything related to health, medicine, drugs, aging, even access to healthcare. And then, like I mentioned before, they have an open topic where if it's not covered, you can pitch them. So, what is nice about NIH is that they have a really great search feature. So, you can go to reporter.nih.gov and actually search all of the things that they have awarded and funded to see if there's something similar to what you are working on in there. But like the DoD, they do have focus areas which come out in a thing called a Notice of Funding Opportunity, or a NOFO. And if you're new to government, get used to all the acronyms because they do not stop. This is just the beginning. So let's take a quick look at their funding areas right now. They're seeking products to address social needs for impacting substance abuse disorders. They have an award to accelerate the commercialization of technologies for heart, lung, blood, and sleep disorders and diseases. Clinical validation of a candidate biomarker for neurological or neuromuscular disorders. Biological based drug discovery and development for disorders of the nervous system. I saw a bunch in here for aging, neuromuscular disorders. In general, if your topic involves clinical trials or human subject trials, you're going to be going through NIH. The DoD will also do some topics that involve human trials just by virtue of the types of products they build. But in general, especially if it has to do with medicine or drug development, you're going to go through NIH. For the funding caps, phase ones are up to 296,000. They're very specific, and these are administered over 6 months. And then phase twos and direct to phase twos are up to 1.97 million over 2 years. Schedule for NIH is standard every year, so that's nice. And they have applications due September 5th, January 5th, and April 5th. The eligibility is standard, small business, fewer than 500 employees. You have the same considerations if you have VCs or investors on your cap table, and you have to do all of the standard registrations. The one extra one you have to do for NIH is register at this website called ERA Commons, and that is one of the National Institute of Health websites, and I think it's what they administer their awards through. So you do have to be registered on there.
NIH is the most unique, I would say, of all of these programs. It's the most niche. So I feel like you know pretty quickly whether or not your company or technology or R&D is a candidate for NIH over other
Yeah,
programs.
and it makes sense if you're doing clinical trials or anything involving human subjects, you're going to be subject to more scrutiny. They're going to have their own processes and procedures, and that's just expected. But if you're a startup in that space, you already know that.
So then let's talk about NASA. If you're lucky enough to be a company building space tech or building space adjacent tech, then this would be the third agency that you would be eligible for potentially. So let's talk about NASA, what they fund, all the things, and some things about their schedule are actually changing next year for 2026. So this is a great time to be talking about it. I know, I don't even know if you know
I
this
don't
yet.
know this. I'm
So
learning along with you. News to me.
So NASA funds through SBIR and STTR R&D related to R&D for products related to the space economy. Very simply, that can be ground-based things, that can be in-orbit things, that can be deep space things. But you're going to be space related, space economy related if you are in this program. Now, NASA actually has two SBIR sitter programs. They have a traditional SBIR sitter program that typically releases once a year in January, and then they have the Ignite program. The only difference really between the two is that Ignite has a heavier focus on commercialization. So if you have already commercialized outside of NASA, but it is a product that is relevant to NASA's research and development, then that's a great place to consider coming in is through Ignite. Traction is just weighed a little bit more heavily, and faster paths to commercialization is just valued a little bit more strongly in the evaluation criteria for a SBIR Ignite versus a regular SBIR. Everything that you need to find about NASA's program is going to be on nasa.gov/SBIR-sitter. We'll link it below. Like we said, they're going to fund space and aerospace tech, anything that aligns to NASA's stated mission needs. So that could look like propulsion, avionics, in space manufacturing. There's actually lots of autonomy in AI. So don't count yourself off if you're an AI software company. There could be applications for you there. Remote sensing, what else?
In space sensors, robotics that work in zero G. There's usually a topic area for things related to human space flight. So, like making humans able to operate better in space or get them into space sooner, faster. One of the rounds where we were awarded had to do with astronaut training here on Earth. There's quite a few topic areas, and they span just about everything you can imagine. I even remember one, I don't know how old it was, but it was like agriculture in space, like growing
Yeah.
fruit in space. They have it's for everything. It's very cool. It's very competitive.
It's very competitive. Let's talk about funding caps, and then we can talk about schedule and eligibility. So the funding caps, their phase ones are 150K and they run up to 6 months. STTRs can run up to 13 months at a phase one to allow extra time for the research. Their phase twos are 850K. They have several post phase two programs as well. So they have a phase 2E, which is 375K. They have a phase two sequential, which the amounts there vary a lot. And they have CCRP, which is kind of like their equivalent to the DoD StratFi or TACFi, which just means that there has to be matching funds outside of the agency. They basically sit in the middle of all of the caps that we've talked about up to this point. So let's talk about schedule. So I mentioned the historical schedule earlier, which was two annual cycles, one for Ignite and one for the traditional program. They are moving to a BAA program, which is what the DoD uses in 2026. The DoD uses the BAA and releases every month. NASA at this point has committed to 3 releases, but has left it open for more. Key dates to know for right now is the program year 2026 SBIR, so not SBIR Ignite, is supposed to be releasing in October of 2025. And the next one should be November of 2025. Then they say they're not releasing anything until early 2026. But it does sound like, given that October and November schedule that they're targeting, that they might be moving closer to what the DoD is doing, where it's less topics but dropped more often throughout the year. We will see. This will be our first year seeing that as well. When we went through the SBIR program, we applied at the singular annual time that you had to do it. That was a big downside because if you were a company who realized that you were a good candidate for NASA funding in March, You would have to wait until the following January potentially, or at minimum the summer period to get Ignite, but looks hopeful. You can, on the link that we'll drop, you can actually sign up for email updates specifically for NASA topics, which I would recommend doing because they are not going to be posted on the other websites that we've listed up to this point.
And one thing to consider with NASA is they expect you to have to do a lot of SBIRs in order to achieve whatever your company's goal is, whatever you're trying to build. They were very upfront about that when we got into the program, that one
Mhm.
of their more successful companies that did end up actually getting their product to the lunar surface needed 20 SBIRs to do it. I think since then, companies have done it with a lot less, but they expect you to apply a lot and to win a lot in order to achieve what you're trying to achieve. That's a little bit different to DoD, and I'm going to assume NSF. Like the Department of Defense agencies really don't want you doing SBIRs for any longer than absolutely necessary. Like ideally, you're only going to do the one, right? You're going to get a phase
Mhm.
one, get awarded a sequential phase two,
Get phase
and
2.
move on.
Yep.
That sentiment does vary a little bit by agency, but in general, like you're supposed to move through the program and get out. I think with National Science Foundation, it's similar. Like they definitely don't want you
Yep.
pitching the same idea to them too many times.
Nope.
Pitch it and move on. I can't speak to NIH if they expect you to be repeat customers, but NASA does. Don't get discouraged if you're not awarded right away. You're probably going to have to apply a couple times. You're definitely going to have to win more than one in order to get something built. And similar to NSF, NASA does not really expect to be your customer necessarily. You know, if you think about it practically, we have one International Space Station. We're going to have one lunar mission. They're not
Mhm.
buying large quantities of things. So they want you to build something that people other than NASA are going to buy and use. And they might put in a little order, but they're not necessarily your end customer, similar to NSF.
Those are great call outs, and, I realized I didn't cover our last point, which is our eligibility. The eligibility is the same. There's a couple extra places where you have to register, like NASA specific sites, but besides that, there are no differences in the type of company that can bid on a NASA topic versus not. The only other thing I wanna call out that I didn't mention before, and I should have mentioned it with NSF as well, is NSF nor NASA have direct to phase 2. So the only way to get started with their SBIR Insider program is to start with a phase 1. They do not have any other at this time, the way some of the DoD agencies do. So just something to think about, right, as you're looking at these funding caps. If the phase ones are truly too small that they are not worth it, that would lean you towards the DoD or the Department of War options rather than something like an NSF or a NASA where you have to start at a phase 1.
NIH does also have direct to phase two, but they have very specific requirements that you have to meet to be eligible for those. You can't just walk in the front door and be like, oh, I don't want to do a phase one for this. Just advance me to phase two. They don't have that. Meet all the requirements. But yes, that is a great call out. The only front door to NASA SBIRs is through that phase one.
But most businesses that we've come across, just speaking to other founders who are like, what is this program at? Am I even eligible? Is they are aligned to at least one or two.
Yeah.
And usually those one or two are going to be NSF or DoD Department of War,
Yeah.
is what we've seen. So if you're overwhelmed by the number of websites and not sure, I would start with one of those two.
Yeah. If you were developing a medication that needs to be manufactured in space in zero gravity, and it is a drug that will make super soldiers, you could bid under all four.
I love this. I love that you came up with that off the top of your head. It's a good illustration of your creativity, I feel like.
Thank you. That is our high-level overview of the four biggest SBIR STTR programs. If you want to learn more, we will link all of the websites that we talked about below, and then you can also check out the free guide if you want to get started. And be sure to check out this video next if you want to know what might happen to the SBIR and STTR program going into 2026. All right. Bye.